All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll get started. My watch has 1:30. Let's take a seat and we'll start with the. Okay, just send me a note. All right, this is the House Higher Ed Subcommittee meeting. We're going to take up the 2014 budget. We'll start with the Regents and Mr. John Brown.
Thank you, Mr.
Floor is yours.
Chancellor sends his apologies. We're having a board meeting today, so you get me instead. If it's okay with the committee, I'd like to work from the track sheet. And let me start with what's listed under common changes. Let me make sure everybody's got one before I start.
Do all the members have your tracking sheet? Looks like it. John, go ahead.
It's, I have what's labeled page 54 of 72. Okay.
Starts with 40.1. Everybody there?
I printed out the whole track sheet versus you get a subpart thereof. Okay, on what you have is page 5 under the Board of Regents. There's a section at the top labeled common changes, and these items are actually spread throughout the different activities, but for this purpose they're all rolled up so I can talk about them hopefully one time and then you'll not see them again. The first one is reflect an adjustment in telecommunication expenses for $216,000. I believe that to be the GETS money where GTA bills, the governor put the money in for what is going to be our bill for the coming year. Second item, similar item, state personnel. This is the TeamWorks billing, $1,000. And then we come to a couple of larger items. Item 40.0. You don't have them rolled up? Can I have a track sheet? Move to reschedule, Mr. Chairman. He's trying to throw me off here. No, how does this work? Okay, try this again. Now I'm on page 5 of 12. Let's start with the Ag Experiment Station. Under the Ag Experiment Station, you have 3 items there. The first one, let me explain the first item, and then you're going to see it several times, and then I'll try not to hit it again if we're good. It says reflect an adjustment in the employer's share of teachers' retirement system for the Ag Experiment Stations. It's $199,000. This is where the rate for the employer is moving from 11.41% to 12.28% of salary. This is a number and money that was added by the governor. This is what it takes to keep the teachers' retirement system actuarially sound. It's not an item we requested really, but it's money that the governor has put into the appropriate budgets. There's money here, there's money in K-12, and you'll also see later on where we have some ERS employees that there's an adjustment for ERS. The next 2 items, the next one is a reduction in personal services funding for $1 million for the Ag Experiment Stations. When I talked with you about a week ago, I had mentioned that most of the B unit or other organized activities are taking a 3% reduction. This is true for the fiscal 14 budget as well. This $1,053,000 is a 3% reduction. It's being achieved largely by holding vacancies open in the experiment station. And then the last item under Ag Experiment, you'll also see this one several times throughout the document. This is an increase in the employer's share of health insurance for the university system that has its own plan separate from the state health benefit plan. Our employer share is increasing 5.7%, which in the scheme of things is not too bad. That reflects some medical inflation, less what we've tried to do to keep the costs down through co-pays, deductibles. We are on a 70-30 basis where the employer pays 70% and the employer pays, the employee pays 30. So these are the changes for Ag Experiment. And I guess I can take it item by item in terms of the activity if you have any questions.
Let's do this, Mr. Brown. Let's, members of the committee, you can see that like he said, the increase in funds and the 3% is reflected. If you can just, as you go through it, if that's not just something new, all of the specific changes, and then committee members can, if you have a question as he goes through, we can stop and take a look at that. Will that work for everyone? Is that easy enough? Nice.
Yep. Okay. The next activity, 40.2, is Athens-Tiston Vet Lab. This item has no state funds in it. It's totally funded through a contract through the Department of Agriculture and other funds, so no changes. Item 40.3, the Cooperative Extension Service. Once again, you see the change there, $215,000 for teachers' retirement, as well as the third item, which is the same health insurance change of 5.7%. Sandwiched in between is a reduction of personal services funds of $884,000. That too is a 3% cut. The number being cut there is identical to what was in the amended budget, and it too will be achieved through holding positions vacant. No layoffs projected. Item 40.4, Enterprise Innovation Institute. The first two items, the teacher's retirement system caption, again, the spread there, as well as health insurance. And then reduce operating expenses. You may recall in the amended budget that this activity had a 1.56% reduction. Rather than the 3, the governor's office had elected to exempt some of the personnel cuts in enterprise innovation, matching funds involved. I think in the amended you took that to a 3%. Since that time, there have been layoffs at Enterprise Innovation Institute. I know Georgia Tech's got folks here today. They would appreciate keeping that where it is. Some important stuff going there. Item 40.5, Forestry Cooperative Extension, teachers' retirement, health insurance, and then a reduction in funds for personal services. This represents a 3% reduction for personal services or 3% for that activity. Once again, maintaining a vacancy will how they'll carry that out. Item 40.6, Forestry Research, TRS, health insurance. And then personal services, that also is a 3% reduction, maintaining a vacant position. Then we come to item 40.7, and I need to explain this one a little bit. As you probably are aware, the archives are being transferred from the Secretary of State to the Board of Regents, assuming legislation passes anyway. In the fiscal 14 budget, the amount being transferred is $3.8 million in state funds, $4.3 million in total funds. What I would ask you here today, this is probably the one cash ask that I'm making of you, is that 10 positions are being transferred. But if you're familiar with the archives, there's two pieces. There's the State Records Center, which in essence is a warehouse and saving of the records and in your day-to-day agency records. There are 5 individuals employed there, and it's a separate physical location than the actual archives. And then there are 5 positions at the archives, which is located near Clayton State College. Currently, the amount of money that's been transferred of $3.8 million allows for the archives to be open 2 days a week. Of that $3.8 million, $2.7 million of it is used to pay the rent on the building. It's a Tufts building. We're in negotiation to transfer that building from the State Properties Commission to the Board of Regents inventory. As we transfer it, we'll certainly do what we can to try to renegotiate the deal. But 2.7 of the 3.8 is just for the lease payment on the archives itself. So that leaves 1.1 million. There are only 5 positions. And you have to consider there have to be people, in essence, watching the door to make sure none of our artifacts make out through the front door. At the same time, you have archivists that need to pull that or do other duties. So having 5 people really leads to very little public access. The request that I'm going to make to you, there was $582,000 cut while this was still in the Secretary of State's office. That took it from a budget of $4.4 million to $3.8 million, which is the amount of the transfer. In order to get the archives back open for at least 4 days and probably 5 days, we need about 7 positions, and that's approximately $450,000. You may be aware the Chancellor appointed a commission to look at the archives. Part of their recommendations in doing the transfer is this budget recommendation that I'm bringing to you while we're in the process. We are going to try to take advantage of any economies of scale being near Clayton State. Clayton State will provide some security with their police officers. Clayton State will do some of the fiscal work in terms of payroll and that sort of thing. But beyond that, there is a need for the 7 positions so that the activity that needs to go on can go on, and that we stay open for the to the public for 4 to 5 days. So really what I'm telling you is that the 450, if you see fit to do it, puts archives on sort of a stable footing as it makes the transfer, so that we don't immediately have a problem. And I think we'll be able to go from there and then see how it works going forward. But I just don't want to start off with a problem right away. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, the question that I have is the $448,000 is for 2 additional positions?
7.
Okay, well, where is the 5?
The 5 is built into the base budget of 3.8. The 3.8 million, which is the amount that was moved from Secretary of State for 13 into our beginning 14, includes a total of 10 positions. But 5 of them are at the Records Center, different location. 5 are at the actual archives. And then to the 5, I'm asking that you consider adding 7 positions, so that between the whole operation it would be 17 positions, but 12 of them would be at the actual archives in order to help the public.
So that $448,000 is for 4 positions? I mean 7 positions?
Right.
It's not 2 in addition to the 5. Okay.
7 that are currently unfunded.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay, moving on, top of page 6 of 12, the Georgia Radiation Therapy Center, no state funds in that, just other funds, no change. Section 40.9, the Georgia Tech Research Institute, you see the teacher's retirement system change spread. Under operating expenses, $172,000 reduction. That is a 3% reduction, same as the amended budget. Then there's the change in health insurance. And then item 40.9.4 is the removal of a one-time ad, or at least it was deemed one-time ad for industrial storm research. It was added in the 13 original budget. It was actually cut in the amended budget. So truthfully, the funds were never expended at all since it's out of both budgets. Item 40.10, the Marine Institute. That's the spread for the teacher's retirement, as well as the health insurance spread of 5.7, and then the reduction of operating expenses. That's a 3% reduction, and the $14,000 is the same amount as in the amended budget. 40.11, the Marine Resources Extension Center, teacher's retirement, health insurance, and then the reduction to personal services represents 3%. It's the holding of a vacancy. Item 40.12, the Medical College of Georgia Hospital and Clinics. The $875,000 is a 3% reduction, same number again as in the amended budget. This involves holding 19 positions vacant, no layoffs. It will affect some of the graduate medical education with the 19 positions open. Some of the GME delivery will be scaled back a little bit. Beyond that, you'll see that it says internally generated funds will replace some of it. That may not be a total backfill, but some of the hospital patient revenue will backfill part of the cut. Item 40.13, the public libraries. I know Lamar's here. First, you have the teacher's retirement system spread. Then you have 3 items, and the first one is reduction of personal services and operating expenses. That is a 3% reduction to the library office, as well as to the operating grant that goes to the libraries. That means that in all likelihood, some of the librarian positions around the state have to stay vacant. Also a reduction in expenditure for library materials. That's a $965,000 cut, again 3%. Item 40.13.3, the new directions formula. While the 965 is coming out, the 138 is the formula earnings that essentially go back in to provide for the same thing. It would provide for library personnel or library materials. The new directions formula is a population-based formula, and the population dictates the 138 within the formula. And then the last item is the spread of the 5.7 for the health insurance. Section 40.14, public service special funding initiatives. Let me go through these. First of all, you'll see a roll-up line that is reduced funds for personal services and operating expenses. This is a 3% reduction to most of the lines in the special funding initiative to include the medical college related research money. It is a 3% reduction to Fort Valley land grant match money, which is used to match federal money for land grant status. Then in item 14.2, you see a $5 million add. Last year in the fiscal 13 budget, Governor, General Assembly added $5 million for Georgia Regents University to develop the Cancer Center. This is an additional $5 million. That brings the total funding for the Cancer Center to $10 million total. And the goal there is to have another designated cancer center in the state other than the one at Emory. Item 14.3. This is funds for the Health Professions Initiative. This is the GME money. And let me direct your attention to a slide in your package and one here. Last year, the General Assembly appropriated $1.2 million to the university system. And then in another spot in the budget, $853,000 was appropriated to the Georgia Board of Physician Workforce. Both were for GME purposes. The stated goal there is to try to generate at least 450 new residents. The idea is that if we have more residency programs training doctors to address our shortage, typically wherever a resident trains, they'll settle within about a 50-mile area. what have we accomplished in the last year? First of all, the Georgia board money of $717,000, along with $50,000 of the university system money, was used to develop the Southwest Georgia Consortium. It's a 5-hospital consortium. I believe Phoebe Putney might be one of them in that consortium. $286,000 of the Georgia board money and $200,000 of the university system money was used to begin residency program at Gwinnett Medical Center, somewhere between 30 and 56 residents total. And then $620,000 and $250,000 respectively was for Athens Regional and St. Mary's Hospital, where we'll be picking up 130 plus residency training slots. So that's how the 1.2 and the 853 have been used. Now going forward, an additional $2 million has been recommended by the governor for appropriation to the university system. And with that additional $2 million, plus consider there's $1.2 million still in the base. The $1.2 million that's still in the base will continue to go for these programs. It's about a 3-year cycle before these programs transition from state money to Medicare money. But in addition to the 1.2, the 2 million, the most likely candidates for that 2 million will be Northeast Georgia Medical Center that's looking to start residency. Redmond Regional's been mentioned. Tanner Medical's been mentioned. There are several other hospitals out there that are interested in starting residency programs to get us toward the goal of the 450 and address our physician shortage. So that's how we have used the first 1.2, and this is what the second 2 million would be used for. And I need not remind the chairman, there continues to be some disagreement or questions about what is the proper placement of the money between the Georgia board and the university system, and I'm sure you'll decide the right thing. On page 7 of 12, the Regent Central Office. Within the central system office there, you have some employees, retirement system employees, with the change in the retirement rate there, plus the teacher's retirement rate changing. So that's the spread of money there. There's some money for telecommunication expenses. This is the GTA billing, and the governor puts enough money in to cover the GTA expenses. There is a reduction in personal services and operating expenses of $210,000. That is a 3% on the actual system office budget, and it is the same as was in the amended budget. An increase in the health insurance to 5.7. And then there are a couple items. One's basically a language item. The governor did not cut the Southern Regional Education Board program. As far as needing money to meet the regional contract for optometry, that amount of money that's needed to meet that's about $1,800. We can find that in the budget to cover that and make it whole. And then finally, there's a transfer. The largest portion of Galileo, the online library system, is in the university system already, but there's a piece of it that was in the Department of Education for $125,000. This transfer of $125,000 from DOE merely starts consolidating all of the Galileo in one place, and then we can deal with it from there. Item 40.16, Research Consortium, $188,000 reduction. It is a 3%. Same as the amended. Skidaway, the spread of the teacher's retirement and the health insurance, and then the reduction in personal services of $36,000 is a 3%, same as the amended. It'll be achieved by maintaining a vacancy. And then we get to item 40.18, which is the teaching program, also known as the formula. This is easily the largest program in the system, $1.6 billion of state funds, and then when you add in tuition and federal funds, it's a $5.8 billion program. The first two items, that are being added to the formula are the employees' retirement system spread and the teachers' retirement system spread. You'll note that the teachers' retirement amount is $11 million. The grand total of teachers' retirement that's being spread throughout the budget, I believe, is $13 million. So most of it is right here. Item 40.18.3, the most important item probably in the budget in terms of the operation of the system, is a $62 million add. That is based on a 1.59% enrollment increase in university system. It's also combined with some square footage changes. Just to remind you that we're up 1.59% this year, but 1 year from now when we're here, there'll be a decline showing. This 1.59%, since we're on a lag, represents the enrollment from fall of 2011 forward. When we're here next year, we'll be talking about enrollment from fall of 12 that was down about 1.4%. Item 40.18.4, elimination of a $25,000 ad for the Southern Legislative Conference. This was where Georgia State was hosting that conference. It was a one-time ad, and once again, it never really even was a one-time ad because it was removed in the amended before it was ever expended. That conference was held. Georgia State covered the cost of it. Item 40.18.5. This is the Georgia Gwinnett cut again. In the 14 budget, the money that was deemed to be startup money for Georgia Gwinnett that first started 7 or 8 years ago, it's currently about a $16.5 million amount. The governor's recommended a $5 million reduction to that. What I would tell you is that the $5 million is probably a little high, and that hopefully from this what we can come up with is an amount that we agree upon that is the startup money and some kind of a orderly phase out of the money. $5 million will probably be quite a blow at one time, but if we decide to stretch that out over some period of time with some certainty to it, the school will be able to handle that better. Item 40.18.6. This is the issue of retiring debt. Back in 1993 and 94, the state issued GO bonds to build several buildings, and in return, to cover the debt service, funds were deducted from the university system budget to pay the debt service. Those projects are now retired, and these are pretty recognizable projects if you've been on campus. They include the Tech Olympic dorms, and then at UGA, the Ramsey Center. But there was $5 million associated with debt service, and the agreement from 20 years ago was that once these projects were retired, the money would be put back that was being used to pay the debt. The last two items, not state health insurance, but the employer share of the Regents health insurance at $10 million, and then there's $5 million for the retiree health benefits. You see the $15.8 million item there. And then the last item, 40.18.8. This is where the university system and the formula is taking a 3% reduction in keeping with the governor's budget instruction and matching the other activities. Item 40.19, Vet Med Experiment Station. This particular activity is not taking a reduction. They have such little money, and the work going on there in poultry was deemed to be too important. What you see are two ads, and it's simply the spread of the teacher's retirement money as well as the 5.7 health insurance. And then on page 8 of 12, Vet Med Teaching Hospital. The $429,000 reduction is a complete elimination of the state money going into the Vet Med Teaching Hospital. This $429,000 pays for a Vet Med Tech program. These are the folks that support the actual full-fledged veterinarians. The University of Georgia Vet Med program supports 3 other institutions that send students to them. That includes Fort Valley in the system, also includes Athens Tech and Gwinnett Tech. Dean Allen had indicated that with this reduction, they'll be at a crossroads about whether to continue the program, which they probably will, but they'll then be in a dilemma about whether to bill the 3 participating institutions for the students that they send. And then the last 2 items are attached for administrative purposes, flow-through items for us. The payments to Georgia Military College in Milledgeville. There is an amount spread to them for both the employees' retirement system and for the teachers' retirement system. And then item 40.21.3 is a 3% reduction, 47,000 of it being to the actual grades 6 through 12 prep school, and then 22,000 of it being to the 2-year junior college operated there. And then the last section, 40.22, Georgia Public Telecom Commission. Variety of changes there. An employee retirement system ad, spreading of that money. The TeamWorks billing, which is a state personnel thing. A spread of those employees that are teachers' retirement. An increase in telecom expenses from GTA billings. And then you have 2 items. One is a transfer of a contract from the Department of Education. This is a contract that I think is related to work with the Discovery Channel. In the amended budget, half of this amount, about $480,000, was transferred. In the 14 budget, the full amount of the contract, $961,000, is being transferred from DOE to GPTC. And then the last item is eliminating what was deemed a one-time ad for special programming. And much like the other 2 one-time ads, this money was added in 13, but it was taken in both the 13 amended and now 14. So no money was ever actually expended on this special ed programming. All totaled, the university system does net an additional $50 million, largely on the formula enrollment money. And that's pretty much the cash part of it.
Questions for Mr. Brown? Members of the committee? Chairman Rogers wants to turn it on. Hold on. Now you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, the teacher's retirement, and I'm not being critical of the teacher's retirement, but where does this come from? Does this increase come from the actuarial studies they do from the teacher's retirement?
Yes, sir.
Sent to the governor's office of planning and budget?
Right. The actuary does its study. They pass a number along to the governor as to what it takes in terms of state contribution versus employee contributions in order to keep it at some level of funding, something in the 90s. And then the governor in turn spreads it.
Okay. Further question, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly.
The archives. You mentioned a $3.7 million lease. Is that
No, $3.8 million in total state funds are being moved from Secretary of State to Regents, but of the $3.8 million, $2.7 million
2.7
is being tied up in a lease.
Okay. For my own information, in the past, the state did not own that property. Isn't that correct?
It is a Tufts building. It's Tufts means, I think, the University Funding Foundation. I think that's the acronym. It's really a privately owned or built building, of which the Secretary of State, by way of the Clayton County Development Authority, leases it. And as part of this transfer now, we'll have to untangle it being a state properties commission thing to a university system thing. And we'll look for every opportunity we can to try to renegotiate or lower that. But one thing that we really need to do is that currently once that lease is paid over a 30-year period and the debt's retired, we do not own the building. Whereas the structure we're in the university system, we typically own our PPVs. Once we've leased it for 30 years, it becomes our building. So we're going to work this out to where when this is transferred or done, one of the provisions is at least at the end of 30 years of paying the lease amount, we own it.
When will that time be?
We're pretty early. I think this was a 98 or 99 endeavor. I think it runs until 2020 something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Any other questions for Mr. Brown? Thank you very much. Good job.
Do you want any mention of capital at all? I can do it in 2 minutes.
Do it in 2 minutes.
All right. In your package, there is a list of the capital requests from the university system. This is a summary. We had asked for $50 million for major repairs and renovations. That's a normal request for us. The governor recommended it. We asked for $24.9 million. This is equipment associated with projects under construction already. And there was a bit of an issue there. Typically that equipment money follows, but this year the recommendation was for $3.1 million. There may have been some misunderstanding that perhaps that equipment could wait until the fiscal 15 budget, but most of these projects are going to be finished, or all of them are going to be finished and open probably in time for fall of 14, and the idea that you could put them in the 15 budget and have a bond sale is not really practical. So we've been working with OPB and the governor. I think they're going to come to you with a solution perhaps to get that to the 24.9. Under the construction project, we asked for $151 million. We were recommended for $113. What I'd point out to you there, 2 projects that were left out that we requested was Clayton State Project Science Building, and then Georgia Perimeter had a project on the list. Under small cap projects, you'll be seeing those. I'm sure the chairman has seen them. These are projects that are $5 million or under, and there's actually a list of them. These are the small cap projects. They're all under $5 million. This is where we're trying to take existing space and renovate it and put it back into classroom use. You'll see that it's classrooms and labs largely. Rather than building a brand new building, we're trying to repurpose. Again, $5 million or under. Back in the day, we used to refer to them as the minor projects. The board had asked for $33 million. Governor didn't fund any, but you'll be seeing them through the session.
Members, the Buck will be getting you a list of all these requests for your package of all the small cap projects and the all the other projects that have been requested that may or may not be funded.
The other category, we've had a couple of projects that were in conjunction with TCSG, military outreach related. We'd requested 2. One was at Armstrong. It's in the Hinesville community, a significant match from Hinesville, working with Fort Stewart there. It was 4.7. That one wasn't recommended, but another one with Warner Robins, working with military at $10 million was recommended by the governor. And then public libraries, and again, Lamar Veach is here, but this was the library request for $19.8 million, and none of the libraries were recommended in the governor's budget. Okay. So that's capital. That was everything on the table and what was funded and what's still out there.
Members of the committee, continue to talk with the presidents, the libraries, those types of institutions in your district, and we're always willing to sit down and discuss those before we make the final recommendation to the committee. I've not been a fan of trooping every president of the university system and colleges through here to beg for a project. I think that's somewhat unseemly, so I'd rather have those conversations with the members from the district, and we can sit down and look at them in depth that way. All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, the next is going to be the TCSG, Commissioner Jackson. Let me take just a second because they're not going to make a presentation, but to recognize Dr. Susanna Baxter with the Independent College Association. Dr. Baxter, we're glad you're here.
I got it.
Thank you. And We are discussing things that are relevant to the budgets of through the TEG. So Dr. Baxter is here, and she and Jet Tony in the back can answer any of your questions. Commissioner Jackson, I anticipate that there will be several questions with respect to your presentation, and I'm trying to keep to the 30 or so minutes. Mr. Brown did a pretty good job, but following immediately after you, Mr. Cannell is here with Student Finance. I think the committee is going to want to understand the correlation between the governor's press conference the other day and the addition of the grants and what you're going to be talking about here. So let's try to leave some time for questions in there too.
Yes, sir.
With both. I purposefully set you, Tim, up right after Commissioner Jackson so that we could put these together.
We'll do that. We'll do that.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Page 11 of 12 is where you'll find the technical college system. I'll talk right off the tracking sheet and go through these item by item as John did on adult literacy. 46.1, you can see those common items at the beginning there, the adjustment to employees' retirement and teacher retirement, and the adjustment in telecommunication expenses. 46.1.4, reduced funds for operating expenses, and the reduced funds on 46.1.5. That is what was expected to be a 3% cut, and it's been raised to a 4% cut, so it's an additional 1% over what we had planned for at the beginning of fiscal year FY13. You will find that in a couple of other program areas. We had already planned early in the year for the 3% cut. The additional 1% cut adds a little bit more to the adult literacy program. For 14, we believe we can manage that. It is never easy, but we will work hard to manage that. You can see that it's a reduction about a net of about $301,000 to the adult literacy program. We do get federal matching funds for that. We do have some leeway on our matching funds for maintenance of effort. We've got a 10% leeway on our matching funds for adult literacy, and this cut will not affect our maintenance of effort for the federal funds. And again, we will manage those reductions. Departmental.
Let me stop.
Yes, yes, sir.
Several new members of the committee.
Yes.
With respect to this terminology, this maintenance of effort. Yes. In other words, in order to continue to draw down some of the federal monies for individual programs, we have a effective floor of what we're required to spend on these types of things. Now, my personal opinion is at times that's somewhat fungible, but we have to at least give it a try if we want to. It's in the calculation is the fungibility, in my opinion.
It is.
Commissioner Jackson does a good job, but that is a new term. It is in some of the others, but I want for the benefit of some of our new members, it helps us on the federal match. I'm sorry, Commissioner. Go ahead.
We basically have two areas of federal funds, to take a sidebar here real quick, that are seriously important to us. Adult education is one of those that comes from the Federal Department of Education. Again, we have a 10% leeway in the previous year funding that gives us a little more flexibility. The other one is in our technical education program. Those are the Perkins funds that we draw down for technical education. The state gets about $36 million of that. We share that between the Department of Education and our system. They get it for about half of it for CTAE programs in high schools. We get the other half in the technical college. We don't have flexibility in the Perkins money. So when we get into the technical education arena, it's a little bit more challenging than this adult education. So, but the maintenance of effort on those federal funds is a challenge at times. But we can manage it within adult literacy, and those reductions that you see there, which essentially amount to a 4% reduction over original FY13. 46.2, departmental administration. Again, the first four that you see there are common reductions to the system spread for those particular programs. Increased funds on the employee retirement, teamwork, Georgia, billings, the teacher's retirement system, and telecommunications. Then you can see our reductions for telecommunications, for computer charges, for operating expenses, and to eliminate funds for one filled position and one vacant position. That's around 250,000, I believe, total reduction in the administration for essentially the system office. Those we'd already again planned for a 3% cut. It is an additional 1% cut for the fiscal year. We will manage that with holding position vacant and reductions as you see indicated on the sheet there. But we will be able to manage it. I will tell you, and I've said before, our system office runs on a little less than $8 million for a system of 25 colleges. We think that's an efficient and effective way, and we managed it very carefully. The Quick Start program, 46.3, Quick Start and Customized Services. There is no reduction in 14 for the Quick Start program. It will remain at FY. They did take a reduction of 3% in the amended FY 13, but there is no reduction above that in the 14 budget. We appreciate that greatly from the governor's recommendation. We encourage that no further cuts be made. Quick Start is so critical to recruiting companies to Georgia and helping companies expanding in Georgia. You know, it's considered a hallmark program for recruiting businesses to our state. It's one of the best incentives that we have, and quite frankly, further reductions to it would be very challenging for our efforts generally in economic development, and there are no reductions there. 46.4 is our technical education program. Again, common ones through the first four that are taken on all the programs to increase funds for the additional charges. 46.4.5 is the challenging and the big one. That is a reduction of 27 almost 0.4 million. That is for the enrollment decline that we experienced in FY 2011. We're on a 2-year lag. We did have an enrollment decline from 195,000 to 170,000 students, and the funding formula would drive a reduction, and that's what that reduction is. When you take that reduction with the reduction in FY13, which was a 4% reduction, that amounts to a 10% reduction. That's a tough and challenging circumstance for the system. It is what our formula does drive. It will require us to be very surgical in the way we implement those reductions. Fortunately, we did raise our tuition and fees in January of this year, which will generate some funds in 14, but the scope and the amount of this reduction will impact each of our colleges. The technical education dollars are the ones that we essentially send to our colleges. Those reductions will require probably some reductions in force. It will require us to look at programs that are marginal. We've already done that in the past because of challenges and budget reductions. We will continue to do that. It will likely mean some staff and faculty will have to be reduced. I can tell you that in the administrative side of the house, with the history we have of 15 mergers, 15 colleges into 7 colleges, and the very bare bones administration that we run each of our colleges on from a staffing standpoint, this probably is going to mean some faculty and program areas. Again, we will be very surgical in working toward reducing programs that are in less demand than other programs. We will be careful to make sure that we don't end programs or hold off on programs where there is a high demand for for jobs, and our industries require a workforce in that regard. But I can only tell you that that this is a tough one. This is very difficult. Essentially, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, that's our report, and I'll be glad to answer questions. And I'll be glad to go over our capital outlay also if you want me to.
Let's hold on the capital outlay. I'm going to provide to each member of the committee. We're very aware of the individual request on that and the concerns with that. But I think we can come back to it if we have a little bit of time. I really want to spend some time on the some of the things that are about to happen, and more than anything else, I want to talk about a couple challenges, especially the 10% overall cut, and I want to juxtapose that with two things. First being the anticipated number of new students when we take the grant from 3 to 2, back to where it was, which I think is an excellent idea. Mm-hmm. But I want you to give us some idea of how many students you think that's going to be, how many new instructors that's going to require, and then tell me a little bit about some of the accreditation issues we're having with having to try to cover this with not full-time instructors, with part-time instructors, and how much that's costing us in that.
Surely. Number one, the governor's support and the legislation that has been is soon to be introduced, I believe, and his announcement to support moving the 3.0 requirement for the HOPE grant back to 2.0 will be greatly appreciated by the system and by myself. It affected last year when it was implemented. We went from a 2.0 to a 3.0. It affected 9,000 students who lost the HOPE grant by not being able to maintain the 3.0. There were another 3,000 who lost HOPE grant because they didn't keep a 2.0, but they would have lost it anyway. So 12,000 went out of the HOPE grant because of the grade point average, but 9,000 of those went out because of the 3.0. We could expect to get some of those back and expect not to lose a similar number in the coming year if we implement the 2.0. We would think then that would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 12,000, 12,500 students who would likely be back in school or stay in school by not losing the HOPE grant to the 3.0 grade point average at the 30-hour mark. Remember, too, that from the 30-hour mark, many of our programs, particularly our technical certificate of credit programs, are in the 45 to 60-hour range. So if a student lost it at 30 hours, they would never get the HOPE grant again by the time they finish their program, which was a huge challenge. We think that those 9,000, and we will reach out to every one of those 9,000 that lost it, that did not find another way to pay for it. We'll reach out to them and try to get them back to finish their programs because they're 30 hours in.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't mean that. If you just took the formula dollars that accrued to each of those 10 to 12,000 students, say 10,000, that formula dollar generally equates to an FTE amount for each student. How much of that $27 million would that be? 10,000 students times?
Let me rely on my staff back here in the corner to do a quick calculation in the head because they're better at that than me. Ken, do you have a sense of what that might be if we recruited 10,000 of those back in from a funding formula standpoint? Right.
I can't hear.
Well, the bottom line, even if we got those back, we're on a 2-year lag on our funding formula.
I understand that.
So it would take 2 years for us to realize any formula funds from those returning students. And the only thing we would realize in the fiscal year 14 when they return is the tuition funds, which HOPE would help pay for. But we wouldn't have formula dollars for them.
Okay.
But I'm sorry, Ken?
The other way to look at that is we lost 24,000 students in 12.
Right.
If we got 12,000 students back, that would be about half of our loss in the funding formula.
That's what I was going to.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
About 15
that's where I was trying to get.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay.
About 15 million.
You want to talk about the part-time and some of the costs?
Okay, on the challenge for accreditation, and we have I believe over the next 2 years, about 7 or 8 of our colleges will be coming up for reaffirmation on their SACS and COC accreditation. And 23 of our 25 colleges currently are SACS and COC accredited. We are now system-wide at 70% of our faculty is part-time faculty. We've had to do that because of the budget reductions and to keep instructors in the classroom. It's also less expensive for a part-time instructor because we don't have to pay benefits. So while it's a wise business decision, it is frowned upon by our accrediting agency, the SACS and COC. They don't have a standard that says what your percentage must be, but they will, when you get over 50% of your faculty as part-time, depending on the team that comes and visits and does the accreditation visit, over 50% is suspect. And in fact, last year, one of our colleges, Lanier Technical College, was giving a recommendation in the site visit that they were about 68% of part-time faculty at the time, and they were told they would likely not be recommended for approval if their faculty ratio was not, their part-time faculty ratio was not lowered by the time they went before the full commission. We had to use some of our emergency funds that we keep at the system office out of our appropriation to give to about $500,000 to give to Lanier Tech to hire some full-time faculty. I can't do that for 7 or 8 colleges that are coming.
That's
up for
expensive money.
reaffirmation. It's expensive, but it's the right thing to do. I can tell you that that part-time faculty, we will always use a large percentage of part-time faculty in the technical college system because we like people who are actually in the industries that come in and teach in the evenings or in their off hours, who have hands-on, real-world, day-in, day-out experience. So we don't think part-time faculty is a bad thing. We just cannot sustain our accreditation status with 70% of our faculty that is part-time. And quite frankly, for students in a college environment, having their faculty available to them on a more full-time basis for counseling and for going in and having regular office hours, that's an expectation in a college setting. That's one reason why the accreditation commission is so rigorous on making sure that part-time faculty does not become the rule rather than the exception in the colleges. So for students and for student success, full-time faculty is important for a college environment. So that's the challenge we have there.
And where the cut is right there in your faculty, dollars to pay faculty.
The reduction, given the mergers and the administrative reductions and the staff that we've laid off in RIFT first, because we're so personnel services heavy, like most state agencies, but we truly are, that's about the only place you have to reduce.
That's pretty clear. Let me let Chairman Knight have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think your second question, as far as bringing up the accreditation, was my question, but I wanted to maybe emphasize what you've talked about as far as this. It's almost this double hit that we've taken with the technical colleges, with the reduction in formula, and in some cases, if you look at the individual colleges, like our Southern Crescent, some of these colleges actually have bucked the trend and increased their enrollment. So it really is a double or triple hit in formula.
Squeeze.
And our college is one that is up very shortly for the accreditation review. So it's of utmost importance that we try to find a solution for this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Knight. I think there's a lot of interest in trying to mitigate that in some way, shape, or form, and we're going to hear from Mr. Cannell here in just a minute, and we'll see how many students and what. I mean, that's paid for through the lottery funds, which is not the same dollars. Okay.
There are 2 other lottery issues, 2 other grant. The governor was very gracious in putting in $6.5 million in the lottery, which I know Tim will talk about, for a grant program for 3 programs. The truck driving program, the practical nursing program, and the early childhood development program where we train teachers for pre-K. Those are three critical programs, and a $1,000 grant to those students, and particularly in the truck driving arena, is greatly needed and will also help us with the enrollment as it relates to those programs. That will enhance, I think, our enrollment. That will add enrollment. But again, we won't realize a funding formula for that for 2 years. So the challenge is that while that certainly helps us, and we'll get tuition funds for that, tuition funds do not cover the total cost of those programs for us. However, I cannot tell you how happy and how grateful we are to the governor and student finance for that $6.5 million grant program.
We just need to figure out the rest of it.
Right, we do. And we'll get some additional funds. It will be Tim will talk more about it. There's a little bit more money available from the 90%, I think about 3% more that we will gain on just the regular grant. So those additions will certainly help our students, certainly will, we think, increase our enrollment, but the reduction from the funding formula, again, even if we get the enrollment increase, the only thing we're going to get from that is tuition. And it certainly helps our students, and it certainly helps our workforce, but we're still going to struggle with the loss of those funds.
Okay. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative.
Mr. As it relates to Quick Start,
Yes.
just want to, again, thank you and compliment you for that. My new best friends at Caterpillar have firmly convinced me that they would not be here in Georgia if not for Quick Start, so thank you. My question is, given the unknowns and uncertainties about when economic development opportunities are coming along, how do you plan within the Quick Start budget? Do you build in a certain amount of funding for a level of anticipated need for those services, or is there enough lag time that we fund it basically once we know the projects are coming?
We basically we work within the set amount we get. We sometimes hold our breaths at the end of the fiscal year that we got a big prospect coming in and we don't have much money left. That can be a challenge. Usually those things happen, though, early enough in a fiscal year. If we had a Kia or a Baxter that was coming in immediately, like NCR came in immediately and we had them up and running within 3 months, if we were in a real bind, we can usually learn about that early enough in a fiscal year that we can work with it and amend it if we have to. And the governor would be, I mean, if it's a big prospect, we're certainly going to be able to fix that. And if we're on the end of a fiscal year, we just work with the company on their timing. And if we were really stretched, we'd figure out a way to do it with some of our funds or foundation money or somewhere. I'd figure out a way to do it. We're not going to let them. But we do that with about $12.6 million. That's one of the best buys you get for the buck in this state budget, is what Quick Start's able to do with not a whole lot of money. So
Chairman Rogers.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner,
Mr. Chairman.
You mentioned reserve. How much do you keep in your reserve account?
We hold back, depending on what the appropriation looks like. Last year we held back about $3 million that we didn't give out to the colleges. And then the colleges, and it's another thing I'll talk about on the other House bill that you'll talk about at the end of the meeting here, House Bill 45, the carryover funds that the colleges have, which is important legislation for us. But that $3 million that I hold out and don't allocate to the colleges, that's really for emergencies, and it can be anything from an air conditioning system that goes out that they don't have the MR&R to fix. It can be for a college that has a huge enrollment decline because a factory closed and they got all these people that leave. Some of them will come in. It can be either they're stretched because they got an enrollment increase or a huge enrollment decline. Sometimes our colleges around a military installation will experience an unexpected enrollment decline if there's a deployment. So we keep that in case at the end of the fiscal year colleges have a financial challenge. And And if by the end of the year, for all of those colleges that have needs that we did not expect, I'll distribute that money to the colleges before the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. Another question, Mr. Chairman, if I could. Why do we do a 2-year lag? I know in good times it's okay, but in times we're in right now, and I may have to direct this to the chairman, but is that in code, Mr. Chairman, 2-year lag on funding?
It's our good friend John Brown, who knows more about this funding formula than anybody.
Well, he's never told me anything about it. So.
Well, we'll put him on the record here.
For the record, the reason there's a 2-year lag on funding form, first off, none of our formulas are in code.
Right.
But the reason for the 2-year lag originates back in the 1980s when these formulas, or at least ours, was put together, and later theirs was modeled on ours. The expectation is that instead of growing, that the university system was going to be in decline. And the 2-year lag was for 2 reasons. One, to give a chance to adjust to a decline so that you didn't have it and then immediately have to lay off. You could adjust to it. And then the other reason for the lag was to make sure that you had an actual year of enrollment. When you consider that what you're funding us in 14 for is fall of 12 plus spring plus summer, you have a full year of known data, and there's no projecting or guessing involved. You actually have it, and that's what you fund on. And then once you find yourself in an environment like that, or you have double-digit increases, it creates real problems. But the strategy back in the 80s was to give you some reaction time and predictability without budget offices arguing.
So that was 33 years ago.
I was in elementary school.
That was before I got here.
I do. One other question, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner,
Yes, sir.
what programs are y'all eliminating? I know you mentioned you're having to eliminate some because of the revenue problem. Can you tell us what particular programs are outdated? And I guess that's based on each 7 colleges you're dealing with now.
Every college will do their individual analysis. If I can tell you, and once we know what the size of the cut ends up being, the colleges will have a number they've got to hit. They may not be able to close enough programs or make only have 1 class of a program instead of 3 classes of a program, and therefore they can get rid of 1 instructor. However they decide to manage it for their individual service delivery area and the businesses and the workforce demand that they have, that will be done by each individual college, and then we'll roll it up at the system level. I'll be able to tell you what that looks like closer to the end of this fiscal year before they go into the next fiscal year, but they've not even begun. Well, they've begun to look, but I can't tell you today what specifically those programs will be. They will not be the high demand programs where they need people in the workforce in their service delivery areas or their region of the state. But the challenge is, we've been through this before. When our enrollment went up to 195,000 or 197,000, we were in bad economic times then, and we didn't get that enrollment increase of $62 million. So we've had to raise our tuition to the point now where we're at $75 a credit hour on the semester side. Still one of the lowest in the Southeast and in the United States. But we can't make up the total difference and stay at a level base and deal with the demand in a very easy way. We looked last year at shuttering underutilized campuses. We may have to do that again this year, take another look at that. If there's a campus that doesn't have enough enrollment on it, we may have to shutter some campuses. I've not done an assessment of that. I've said I don't want to do any more mergers. I'd prefer not to, but if we get to that level where we can't serve the demand, we'll have to look at every option we have on the table for what we'll do. Some of it will be programmatic. Most of it will be personnel related.
Okay. You will have veto power, though, on each one of the campuses, I guess, some colleges?
Yes.
Okay. Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you.
Myself and our board.
Chairman Rice.
Ron, thank you for everything you guys do. You do a great job.
Thank you,
Witness
Mr. Chairman.
Gwinnett.
Thank you.
Tag, we really appreciate that. I had a question with regard to what you just were talking about in terms of the cost per credit hour. And I was wondering if you could just kind of elaborate on what a 1% increase in per credit hour rates means in terms of revenue, and also, secondly, when you did raise the rates last year, was there an attributable reduction in students as a result of that?
Right. Let me take the last one first, okay, if I could. The 24,000 that we lost last year, we had a complex set of factors that impacted that 24,000. Number one, we had gone in the fall of last year from quarters to semesters. That meant that some of our students took a smaller workload in credit hours than they would have. And it's the same kind of thing that happened when the university system years ago went from the quarter to semester system. They had students that took a smaller workload in terms of credit hours. Our numbers and our research indicates that wasn't a major factor, but there were students that did take a smaller workload and thus created fewer credit hours. Second thing was we had a lot of students, because the economy was beginning to make a turn in some sections of the state. Some of our colleges had students that got jobs and just didn't come back. And I think that factors in, and that's the cycle we follow. When the economy goes down, our enrollment goes up, and so then the economy comes back. Some people get jobs and just don't finish their program. We think that was a portion of it. We had the hope changes that were on top of the challenges that the students had, and when the hope changes changed and our tuition went up, the out-of-pocket dollars in this January, went from $154 to over $600 in out-of-pocket money that they had to come up with. And I got to tell you, our non-traditional student, adult student, over the age of 26, with a family and no job, $600 coming out of their pocket was very difficult to come up with. Half of our colleges implemented the federal loan program, which we did not do a lot of because of the great help we had from Hope and Pell. Previously, it was not necessary, but it became necessary to help those students that were on the margin. We had a lot of students who wouldn't take the loan, wouldn't apply for the loan. Quite frankly, didn't think they could meet the loan requirements, although there are very limited loan requirements for their federal loans. And then we had a number of colleges that implemented, their foundations implemented that gap scholarship funding to help those students. But we just didn't have enough money in the foundations. Half of our college didn't want to go into the loan program. I'm anxious about our students going into the loan program, although it wouldn't be huge. But I can tell you that there are a lot of things about the loan program I don't like, and I can tell you about that later. But at the end of the day, those factors contributed to the 24,000. We know that 9,000 were affected by the 2.0 to 3.0. So the other 15,000 were affected by one of the impacts or multiple impacts of all of those things converging at the same time. I think our colleges did a great job of managing the quarter to semester transition. But all in all, we believe that 24,000, some of it was natural due to the economy, some of it was due to the quarter to semester, and some of it was due to the hope change and the lack of the funds in the pockets of the individual to do it. Now, to the first one, a 1% increase in our credit hours would let me rely on Ken in the back. Ken, 1% increase in our credit hour, what would that generate? credit hours in the Hope and in the funding for in the 1% in tuition.
Yeah, I was wondering, since you raised
Right.
tuition a year ago, I was trying to get a benchmark to say, okay, we raised tuition 1%, how much money is that worth normalizing for the numbers as it would with people who would not leave the system?
We were expecting the tuition increase and the fee changes that we made in this past year to generate somewhere between $20 and $27 million. But it depends on the enrollment staying the same.
And the average amount of that increase on a percentage-wise basis from the semester credit hour?
The percentage-wise increase for our tuition last year, going from 65 to 75, was, I'm sorry, about 12% is what we increased it last year.
Okay. Thank you.
We're running about 15 minutes behind, and I have a bill I have to introduce at the end of this, so I'm going to ask the commissioner to continue to meet with the members of the committee and to talk to them. We have a challenge. I think everybody can see that in the technical college system that we need to try to mitigate in some way, shape, or form. I'll be continuing to talk to you about that. Commissioner, thank you very much. We're going to probably get, you mentioned House Bill 45 and gave a little bit of the information on it. I'm going to bring that up after Commissioner Cannell comes up and go ahead and do that while the...
And I apologize, I can't stay, but Laura Gamage and Ken
will be
here,
here.
and they
Okay,
can
Laura.
answer any questions, so
That's
I'm
good.
not here. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much,
Members of
Mr.
the
Commissioner. Mr. Cannell, thank you very much for...
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We are on student finances on 61 of 72. And let me just dive right in here if I can with the first program listed here, which is 44.1 Excel. For new members of the committee, Excel is sometimes referred to as Early Hope. It is a dual enrollment program, which means that students who participate in that program are in high school and they are enrolling in different, okay, we got an updated one that I didn't have, this page 9 of 12.
Sorry about that.
So that's quite all right.
Okay. We're working with you and Mr. Brown. You guys have seen more tracking sheets than all of us put together, so I figured you
Okay. As I said, dual enrollment is a program whereby a high school student can enroll in a college course and get credit both for the course towards an eventual baccalaureate degree as well as receive credit towards their high school graduation. We know that students who pursue dual enrollment courses typically graduate at a significantly higher rate from high school than those who do not. They also tend to go to college at a greater rate and graduate from college at a greater rate. So the governor has recommended an increase in Excel funds and assuming about a 15% increase in the number of students who may participate in that. We did about 5,000 students last year. So it's certainly something also consistent with the governor's priority regarding Complete College Georgia. Second item, well, the next item is the Hope GED, the Hope Grant, and I'll come back to that in just a second with a couple of things. The Hope Scholarship Private and the Hope Scholarships Public, all the numbers that you see on that page are based upon the projections next year. For those of you who've been around in the General Assembly for a while, you know that no student who's ever been eligible for Hope has not gotten the full benefit they were entitled to. So these numbers simply reflect the projections of need for next year. If for example, they were off a little bit, we'd be able to have the opportunity to adjust it either in the amended budget through some fiscal affairs transfer. But I did want to echo some comments that Ron talked about just a minute ago on the Hope Grant. Obviously, you'd seen from my previous presentations as well the rather sharp decline in the number of students using the Hope Grant, primarily as a result of the changes to Hope. And certainly I want to join Ron and the chairman's comments. I really praise the governor and the House and Senate leadership for moving on the restoring or moving the grade point average requirement for the Hope Grant back from 3.0 to 2.0. You know, the Hope Grant has probably been the best workforce development program the state has ever seen, even with respect to Quick Start. So I think that's a good thing. And also, Ron had mentioned the governor's recommendation regarding creating a supplemental grant program for the first time in FY14 with about $6.5 million to target 3 programs of study within the technical college system, that being the commercial truck drivers, early childhood development, practical nursing. I think aside from the fact that these are jobs in demand, I think it is also wise at least to test the idea that we may be able to use, whereas HOPE, both the scholarship and the grant, remains a very broad-based college promotion, post-secondary promotion type of program, to be able to use at least a small portion of those funds to kind of strategically direct some of the funds to promote certain programs. It would be a good idea to see how well that works. Moving down now to 44.11, North Georgia Military Scholarship Grants. Note that there is a reduction to that program. I think subsequent to the release of the governor's budget recommendation, I think the Office of Planning and Budget is aware that that probably is going to leave us a little short next year if that recommendation remains at the governor's recommended level. They're aware of that. I think they are seeking to perhaps adjust that in the amended budget next year. The total we believe would be short is about $500,000 in that program. This is the program that provides, in essence, full ride scholarships to individuals who commit to being in the military. There are 3 individuals from each congressional district. This program has a high retention rate of students who enter it and stay in the program, and also part of the cost increase would be related to the fact we are adding the 14th congressional district, so there'll be some more student scholarships available next year. So I just want to put a marker on that one that we are a little short based on the recommendation. On the tuition equalization grants, 44.14, this is the grant funds we provide. $700 per academic year for students enrolled in the private schools. This program has been around since 1972. This is where we, based on the budget instructions that all agencies received to reduce their state funds, is where we took our cut. The good news is that despite the cut that you see here, we expect to be able to maintain the $700 amount of the grant available to students next year. So that's certainly good. We won't be able to have to reduce that further. I would also like to add just a couple of other things. We also know that although it's not on the tracking document with another program we run, the Engineering Scholarship Program, that program had seen some decline in the number of students who were participating in the Engineering Scholarship, but we've seen a significant uptick this year. There is no change in the governor's recommendation on the funding side, but I can tell you that so far this fiscal year we have already expended about 60% of our budget and have 96 additional qualified applications on hand. So the combination of the applications on hand that are qualified in addition to the money out the door, we're about 125,000 short in the 13 budget, and that may well be the same amount we will be short again next year. So again, there may be something can be changed in the amended budget, but again, just want to put a marker out there that I think we're a little shy in that program account as well. Okay, great. The last thing I'll mention, and then be happy to take questions, is the, again, it's not on the tracking document, but I did want to make special note of it. Back a couple of years ago when this General Assembly amended the HOPE law to deal with the kind of, in fact, the fiscal crisis facing the program, you created a student access loan program, a 1% loan program. And we've had 2 years of experience with that program. It provides a 1% loan to a student who needs gap financing after they've exhausted all other state and federal resources available to them over a repayment term of 10 years. And in the 2 years that we've operated the program, we've made almost 6,500 loans, and we've used the full $40 million. And I will say that about a third of all the students who receive assistance under that program are also HOPE recipients, and about 72% of them, almost 3/4 of them, are students who are the poorest students who are also Pell eligible. So that program has worked very well and can address one of the concerns that Commissioner Jackson mentioned regarding the students who attend the technical colleges in terms of that increase in the amount of out-of-pocket expenses that they were facing. This could provide a means for them to help at least cover that cost on very favorable terms. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
As always, very clear, Tim. You do an excellent job in student finance. I think you got some idea of where we are on some of these things. Members of the committee, any questions for the Commissioner? Student finance, so you got, who is that? That would be Chairman Rogers.
Thank you. Tim, I know the TEG, we're at $700. Can you give me a little brief history where we've been and where we probably need to go? I know y'all have feelings and recommendations, but as tuition continues to rise, Do you see that being changed?
Well, frankly, I hope not. I mean, there are about 30,000 students who attend private college. I think the idea behind the creation of the program back, I think, in 1972 was that if the students are attending private college, they're not attending a public school at full taxpayer expense, or at least it used to be when the taxpayer covered 3/4 of the cost of attending college. In previous years and years gone by, the amount of the award was significantly higher than it is now. And so we're seeing a decline in absolute terms in terms of the amount of money that is provided to a student. And then if you compare that to the rise in tuition, the relative value of the tuition equalization grant is significantly smaller today than it was years ago.
It remains a great deal for the state.
Yes.
If we dumped all those students into the public hope,
Yeah, that's not to suggest at
We
all it's
wouldn't be
not
at
needed. I think it is
93%.
quite needed, but in terms of, in response to your question, it is lower today than it was years ago, and tuition's gone up.
You don't see any need to raise it, I guess is my next question.
If monies could be found to raise it, I think that would only be positive. There would be more students who could avail themselves of private schools, and certainly it's in the state's best interest to have an educated workforce.
Okay, thank you.
I see where you're going. I mean, if you incentivize that, you may even more solidify the public side of the hope equation.
Yes.
Because it is it's a great deal for the state. And other questions? And these numbers do, Tim, these numbers do reflect the anticipation of what we're going to need to do, at least in this budget cycle, for the change in the grants for the
Yes.
TCSG.
Yes,
the grant.
and if, you know, it's, as Ron said, we're not sure how many students may come back as a result of that, but these do reflect the 3% increase that's incorporated in here. Again, if we're off a little bit, then we can adjust it in the amended
That's
next
what
year,
the
no
amendment's
problem.
for, and it's only about a 6-month piece of this
Right.
anyway, right? Okay. All right. Tim, I don't see any other questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Members.
Members of the committee, I'm going to change up the schedule just a little bit because I want to move through this, and the next is GPB. Ms. Ryan, if you'll indulge me, I want to go ahead while I have a quorum. We're running just a little bit behind. I want to quickly go through House Bill 45. It should be in your book, and to try to hold on to the time, we have both TCSG and the Regents representatives here rather than have them stay through the other presentations and answer questions. House Bill 45 is the carry forward legislation that you heard from Commissioner Jackson with respect to. This is the amount that we've, over the last 6 years, we've allowed the individual institutions to have these funds available for, just like in any other business, things that do come up. And they've my personal opinion, I mean, I am carrying the bill, is that they've been good stewards of this. It is not an unreasonable amount in any balance sheet that I've ever seen to be able to carry this type of percentage for this type of thing. But John Brown is here. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to defer some of those to he and or Laura with TCSG. Does anybody have any questions about what the carry forward bill does? We generally pass this almost pro forma each year. Have a motion by Chairman Rogers and a second by the rest of the committee. Any further discussion of House Bill 45? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? House Bill 45 will be reported to the clerk. Thank you very much, members of the committee. All right, I'm sorry, Ms. Ryan of the Georgia Public Broadcasting. I didn't mean to throw a curve at you there, but come on up. Members of the committee, while Taya Ryan is coming up, I want to let you know that she may mention it in her presentation, but I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to open it up to others. They have some pretty exciting things they've done on the textbooks that, with the money with the very little bit of money we appropriated to them over the last couple of years for this, especially with the Georgia history text. And I'm going to plan either later next week or the week after, before the 14 budget, a full demonstration from her department. And what they've done is, I personally think, better than even all of the technicians and engineers at Apple could do with their massive corporation. What they've been able to put together with bubble gum and paper clips is an amazing thing, and they're going to save us millions of dollars moving forward in the next few years. I just wanted to give them a real kudo for that, and I'm appreciative. But With that, I won't take any more of your time. I'm bragging on you.
That's okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are proud of that project, and I truly appreciate that this committee has been, and you have been so supportive of it. It has been an extraordinary project for all of us. In terms of our budget, we do have a couple things we'd like to show you, but in terms of our budget, went through Regents, and you had, okay, so again, it's different for us, but basically, overall, we have the same common changes that you heard in the Regents budget. Adjustment in telecommunications, the 40.01, is that the same number that is up here? No?
It's 40.221.
Oh, 40.221 now. That's okay. All of these, in essence, from 22.1 to 22.4 are all of the common changes that we share with the rest. So if there are any questions, I think they were pretty well answered by the Board of Regents folks, but they are common changes. The 22.5, I'd like to point out, you did discuss it a bit, the transfer from the Department of Education money for our Discovery Learning project. We have kept it within Georgia Public Broadcasting because we know how to administer this project. This is the project that I've spoken to you about for a couple of years now, which is a digital education project where we provide literally hundreds and hundreds of hours of digital material for K through 12 teachers within Georgia. This past year, we had 80,000, almost 82,000 teachers download this material from us and use it in their classroom millions of times. So we have determined that we would like to keep this contract as part of our digital delivery to students K through 12 in Georgia and to the teachers. So this is a simple pass-through so that we can maintain this project. We do have the expertise to administer it to the teachers. So if there was any question about why that got transferred to us, excuse me, it is an education project, but again, digital, so we know how to use it. And that really has been our goal within our educational mandate here for the last couple of years, which is to really focus on our digital education. We essentially are slowly becoming a major player in the state as digital educators. And this is where the textbook came into play. Last year, graciously, we did get money from this committee, sponsored by this committee, to create the first Georgia history digital textbook. Every 8th grader in Georgia has to take 8th grade history. The textbooks are no longer cost effective to produce in hard copy, and so we decided to take it on as a digital project. In fact, the last textbook ends in 2004. You cannot get one that goes past that. So we figured if we could turn it into a digital project, this not only will save the state money, but it will be a boon for our students. The chairman is going to have a special showing of this. We will show you the progress we've made. We began in July. The Kindle version will be ready this spring, which is an extraordinary development, short period. But the rest of it won't be done for about another 9 months. We do think it's an incredibly forward-thinking project for the state because it really means that you can meet students on their terms and in terms of their digital education, which we know it's going in that direction. Excuse me. But the other important thing about this is that we found that we had to go back and redo all of the basis for writing textbooks on digital platforms. We call it really being on the bleeding edge because we think of this as easy because the company Apple has made it seem like it is. It is not. And every time you read in the news that a new device has come out, please be thinking of us because now we're up till 3 in the morning figuring out how we transfer this material to that device. And that's been our year for the last 9 months. So what I have here just to show you is the Kindle version of the textbook, which is already created. And again, we'll have a larger showing of that. The other thing that we got a little bit of grant money for this year was Race to the Top money. And again, we wanted to show you how we use these specific grant monies to augment the things that we're doing at GPB in digital education. One of the things that we have the ability to do is reach out to young kids because we can meet them on their terms. We can meet them on these devices. We know how to create material for these devices. So we got a grant from Race to the Top grant because what they figured out is amid all of their need to look at how students are being monitored by teachers and teacher performance, the crucial thing, and we heard it with the technical college here, the crucial thing is to connect the job to the student and inspire particularly high school students to reach after some form of STEM-related career. And so what we did was we created 16 short, about 8-minute segments that are now available across all of YouTube. We find that they are being downloaded, used, shared, mashed up by these kids. And what we did was we took 16 industries, career industries in the state of Georgia, and we highlighted how if you were willing to go into the area of STEM education, what an exciting choice you would make. You are not taking math can result in working at the Weather Channel, for example, a very direct career path. And what we did was, each of these are 8 or 9 minutes. We made just a 2.5 minute video for you to see. It starts at the career fair, and there's a number of different industries that we just took a moment of, but they are all on our website. You can find them all on YouTube, and they're being used throughout the state by high school students and high school teachers. So can we take a moment? Kyle, can we call it up here? We have audio? I hope we can call it up. We have audio?
Fast Forward is on the road, heading up to Dalton to learn a little more about Georgia's job market. But this is taking a while. Can we speed things up a little? That's more like it. Welcome to the first episode of Fast Forward in Dalton, Georgia. There are hundreds of Georgia-based companies at this career fair, so let's get to it. So tell me about your company.
Hi, I'm Liz Swafford, Recycling and Education Program Coordinator.
I am a graphic designer at H2B Creative.
I'm the director of the Police Academy at Georgia Northwestern Technical College.
Good stuff. But who's working this joint? A bunch of crusty old scientists?
I'm an industrial engineer at Shaw.
Okay, not what I expected. Anyone else?
I'm a process engineer. I'm a technical development engineer at Shaw Industries.
That's 3 different kinds of engineers. How many kinds are there?
I'm an industrial engineer. There is also polymer and textile fiber engineering, mechanical engineers. Some of my friends are civil engineers, and whatever works for you.
I didn't like math in high school, but I did like science, but maybe not enough to major in it in college. But I liked English, so now I can come here and communicate about science.
You know, we have security personnel, we have technology folks, we have public health people, we have healthcare workers.
You can do other things like graphic design, communications, education, materials, brochures, posters. My gosh, you can do laboratory if you want to, and you can do travel or you can stay local.
That's right, I'm a jet pilot.
Then this is a great time to find out how airplanes fly.
Almost all aircraft have a similar wing shape. You can see that the upper surface is curved more than the lower surface. This is intentional.
Chris is talking about something called Bernoulli's principle. As an airplane wing slices through a column of air, the air going over the top of the wing has to take a longer path than the air below. Because air is elastic, it'll meet the air on the other side. So the air going over the top has to move faster. Bernoulli's principle dictates that the air moving faster will have a lower pressure than the air moving slower. And that lower pressure actually sucks the plane up in the air.
And then we have about 1,000 people total that work at the Weather Channel, people who work in advertising, in marketing, in graphic design, in technology development, in finance. So you need people of all different expertise to pull together a company like this.
Anything else I should keep in mind?
Pay attention now and you'll make money later.
And later will be here sooner than you think. It might even be here next time on Fast Forward. We'll see you then.
Just a short bit about that they've been enormously successful. We've taken anything from Shaw Industries to the Weather Channel to graphics, cartoon graphics and software development. What it is to understand that there are real people behind these industries and that as students you can go and have a great career. We found them to be so successful that they've caught the eye of the national DOE, and they've asked to see them and try to distribute them themselves. As well as they've been so successful, we got a grant again from Race to the Top to do another 16. So we're very proud of that, and we're proud of the extension of our digital role. Overall, I think we're doing well in terms of relating to this committee. One of the things that I think it's important to understand is how many universities we now are in partnership with that we had not been in partnership before a few years ago. Recently, we just refreshed our partnership with the Regents University in Augusta for greater presence with our radio station there. We have a new partnership with Mercer University in a journalism program to help train 20th century journalists, and in our case, much of it is digital education. Great forum for community engagement at GPB Macon in Middle Georgia, radio, all coming out of this relationship with Mercer University. We continue to work closely with the University of Georgia in Athens in our radio and television, and we also now have our studios at Armstrong University, radio studios in Savannah, and we work closely to bring students in so they can learn our digital radio and television business. And we are talking now to Columbus State University. So when you think of us, particularly in higher education, we are becoming intimately involved with a number of the universities here and allowing our doors to be open for students to come and learn and train. For all of our work, and I'm going to pat the back of my team this year, we won an award that in some ways has everything to do with education and nothing, but in our business, it's the most important award that we can win. We won the Southeast Regional Station of Excellence Award this year. We were up against every commercial station and every public station within the Southeast, and the first time in 50 years we took the award. So I hope you're as proud of what the investment you make in GPB, because that award is not just for programming excellence, that award is also for the work you do in the community. So thank you very much. It obviously has been a great couple of years. Last year was terrific. You know, we all are stressed out by financial situations, but we've managed to balance on a few projects.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. As always, you have something fascinating and interesting to tell us, and what you do with the very few dollars we give you is amazing, and it's certainly not just Big Bird, and it's not people in Victorian English thinking of deep thoughts, although I see the majority of leaders come in. He probably likes those shows. But we're thrilled that you're here, Leader O'Neill. Any questions of members of the committee, Ms. Ryan? And I please do attend the demonstration of the textbook. I had a real quick question for that. When you first started talking to us about it, one of the metrics that I found very compelling on a digital textbook was what we spend today on that 8th grade textbook and what you think we'll have to spend going forward. And remember, this is one class, one book.
Right. This is really why digital textbooks work. We spend $100 on the book itself. Overall, that's the average price for the history textbook. If you look at the monies that the investment that we're putting into this, and then you can price the digital textbook, let's say at half that, for the download. And then you can add on each year maybe a couple of dollars for the downloads to continue. Because remember, with a digital textbook, we're never finished. Every year we do upgrades. And that's easy to do once all the material is digitized. So what happens is literally we have the potential here to save the state 50% and those participating school systems 50% of what they spend now on textbooks. And I think you can extrapolate that out over the next 10 years and realize the kind of savings to the state. As well as, and we can't forget this, the inspiration that we can bring to students to become more engaged in this information than they would have before with a straight textbook. So I think it's a win-win as we put our arms around this 100%. And when you ask why GPB, not only have we developed the skills to develop this, but remember, we have all the digital hard material. I spoke last year that we did a series called Today in Georgia History. We did 366 of these about something that happened that was momentous that day in Georgia history. Well, we own all that digital product. We own all those images and all that intellectual property. All of that, everything that we do will be dumped into the quality of this textbook. So we're going to be able to expand on the quality of what the textbook itself was in its hard form.
Hundreds of millions of dollars if we apply it across. If we want to save our Hope students a lot of money, Mr. Daniel, we can, $2,000 a semester in books, if you can cut that in half. So we're looking forward to your presentation when all the Regents level books are also in the digital format. All right, let me get to you got several questions, and the first is Chairman Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming today. Appreciate your presentation. I just wanted to know whether or not in the content development of this classroom material, the digitized classroom material, whether or not that work is contracted, or do you employ personnel?
It's
to
a
do
mix.
that?
It's been a mix, and that's the most interesting thing. We sent our digital team to a number of workshops and schools, essentially, to learn how to do this a couple of years ago. They were the first ones to create the first high school football app, and you can still get it downloaded on the Apple iTunes. We have an extremely skilled group of people in-house. However, and I find this very exciting, we've incorporated and essentially hired the skills of two other software companies in Georgia who are helping us develop some of the platforms of this. So we've kept the entire development of this in-house. So we have a group in-house that are, in-state, I'm sorry. We have a group in-house that are spearheading it and leading it, and we are utilizing two software companies who are helping us build the technical foundation. We have also hired the original scholar that wrote the textbook, the original textbook, to bring it up to date. So we are not attempting to write the intellectual material ourselves.
So the subject matter expert comes from
the original
sources.
writer of the textbook, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And do you have any dimension in terms of how much is privatized as opposed to publicly funded for the development?
Right now, because all of this is coming from the $500,000 that was given to us last year within the budget, it is all staying within that parameters at the moment. Now, our hope is that we expand it out, because remember, this is just seed money. Our hope is that we now can go to an AT&T or another funder at some point so that we can continue to do updates on this book. So hopefully, like everything else GPB does, it becomes a public-private partnership.
Thank you.
Chairman Rogers.
Mr. Ryan, let me commend you and your staff for what all you do. I'm a big viewer of GPTV. The fundraising you do other than in the budget, how much of that funding, number one, do you receive, and how I assume you depend on it. Can you give us an indication?
Yeah, I mean, we depend very much on it. Remember that no money that we receive from the state goes towards our programming. So the programming that you see, except for our educational programming, so the programming that you see on radio and on our television services, you listen to and hear, does not come from the state. We use the state money for projects like this, as well as to keep our infrastructure going. We have 17 towers that I have to keep going. It's enormously expensive, but without it, we cannot deliver this material to these students.
So you're talking about how much in dollars are we talking about?
In terms of fundraising?
Yeah, what you do.
Depends on which year. Liz, what was it this last year? Okay, well, if you figure it's probably about 20% of our budget comes from actual donations. We have money that then we seek from foundations, money that we seek from corporations, and grants.
Okay, thank you.
The state does not fund us by any means, even by 50%. It's about like 43%.
TV, the championship games you televise, that's all sponsored by a sponsor.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. You mean particularly the sports?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, and the reason that we can do so much high school sports and we remain enormously committed to it is that it is recognized as a wonderful way for sponsors to come on board. Yeah.
If you don't have that app, get it. It's free, and you can watch high school football all over Georgia. It's so cool.
And for those that like a mix of their things, I guess this is one thing to crow about. While obviously the Super Bowl was the highest rated show that day in Georgia, Downton Abbey was the second. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I had to throw it in.
Thank you.
Chairman Nix.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm fascinated with the video you did on the pathways. As someone who worked hard on the pathways career clusters, how are you coming up with which ones you're doing and how are you doing? Are you coordinating?
You know, we have a little group of advisors that we've taken from a number of areas, but truly what we look at, first of all, it's within the STEM area. Okay, so we choose areas, for example, Gulfstream. Obviously, that's an obvious one. That was a terrific one to profile versus working in some editorial function. We're really trying to focus on the STEM areas and those industries in Georgia that require those skills. So that was our first sort of sieve that we put everything through. Certainly, companies that allowed us in. We're one of the first that Gulfstream did allow in because they saw the value that young high school students could see this and then see a career path towards Gulfstream. So it depended on a whole range of factors. If you go gpb.org/fastforward, you will see the whole list, and you'll be able to watch every single one of them. And I would love your input. We're about to do the next 16, and if you've got a suggestion, we're just formulating the list now.
Okay, thank you. I think that is great, and we looked at when we did that legislation, is that pull to get the students interested, because some students sit there in that math class and it means nothing to them, but when they see it working,
that's right. When they see it,
it really draws them in, and I think that's a great program.
Yeah, I mean, these were not necessarily made for us. These are made for the high school students, and we have found them to be very widely and well received, and the teachers are now showing them in their classrooms. So they're fun to watch. Please go on and take a look at them. Let me know what you think, if they're effective. We are not the audience, but the kids are. Play them for your kids. You're welcome.
Representative Atwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Ryan, thank you for what you do. In your savings on the digital textbook, which I absolutely, totally applaud you for that, especially after a few days ago trying to pick up my son's book bag, and it was terrible. Does that savings include shipping cost, storage cost, that sort of thing?
Yeah, there are no costs. Oh, you mean for what the textbook costs?
Yeah, Vice, the savings that were.
If it's when it's on the device, then there are no those costs.
What I was thinking maybe you could, because there's storage. If you bought a traditional textbook, of course, you'd be fuel costs, storage costs for the schools.
Yes,
that
you know
sort of
what,
thing.
you're quite right. I hadn't thought about that, but you're quite right.
And that was literally something we had in a debate when I first ran, and I applaud you for that. I think it's just a marvelous way of, especially those of us that use iPads, that can move our students into the 21st century. So
yeah, I think one of the important things to remember also is that we also then have to begin to think about, when we're thinking about buying students textbooks, we have to make sure that what we look at is, are we buying everybody a device? So instead of the school system paying for a textbook, let's make sure that part of that money is geared towards that they have a device, because once they have a device, then their whole world changes. It opens up. What our hope is the money that we do make off the selling of the digital textbook is money that will it becomes self-perpetuating then, because we obviously need resources to continue to update the digital textbook. And what I'm looking at and hoping for, and the goal is that it then becomes self-funding. That's the goal. There you go.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ryan. I don't see any further questions, but stay tuned. You'll see more on that. And that's a great question, Representative. If we could determine that savings too, I think you'll see a significant in that whole pipeline. All right, thank you very much. Next is, as usual, I've left you for the end, Lamar, the Beach for the Libraries. He's always very generous with us. He gets to wag the dog here at the end.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and in reference to the Super Bowl, I hope this is not the 34 minutes of silence after the halftime, but I do appreciate very much the opportunity to come before you and talk a little bit about our Georgia's public libraries. This is a true state-local partnership that goes back many decades now and continues to provide great value and great services to the people of Georgia. I direct your attention to your packet of material that has the Georgia Public Libraries logo on it. The first item on the right-hand side is a did you know item that we've produced that really just talks a little bit about the services and programs of Georgia's public libraries. And I'll start off by saying that right now, 17% of all the funding that funds public libraries in Georgia, only 17% comes from the state. But this 17% is the difference between libraries that run and operate and those that are closed and are shuttered to the public. So that is a critically important 17% of the total amount. We've had certainly cumulative cuts over the last few years that are in the 30% range now as far as state funding is concerned. There's a good deal of certainly cuts in local money also. And the results of those cumulative cuts has been a 24,000 fewer hours open to the public in all of those 400 public library locations. 24,000 hours has been lost. And we have lost 298 library service jobs, which is about a 9.8% reduction in the workforce in public libraries. So public libraries are certainly not exempt and have not been exempt from the cuts that have had to be made both at the local and state level. But at the same time, we have had in fiscal year, the last completed fiscal year was FY12, we have had 33.4 million visits to public libraries in Georgia. 43.5 million items checked out. Those are books, recordings of different kinds. The use of wireless access to digital resources, which Tia spoke of, is up over 200%. So the public is embracing the digital materials that are being made available at public libraries. 13.2 million public computer work sessions using the 7,000 plus public computers in those public libraries. And when you add the wireless access, which means people are bringing in their own laptops and handheld devices using the wireless that's almost totally ubiquitous now in public libraries, That raises that to about 15.4. So many people are using the technology that's in the libraries, both for the computers there in the building as well as their own handheld. And we have many cases where people are coming early to the library, sitting in their cars, and using the wireless access as a hotspot in their communities. Let me direct your attention to the packet again, and on the left-hand side is the fiscal year 2014 capital budget outlay request. And again, this has been one of those absolutely exceptional local state partnerships to construct and repair and renovate library buildings throughout the state. There's one change that we have made since this was originally submitted through the Board of Regents into the governor's office. Obviously, the governor was unable to recommend any projects, but certainly we want these to be viewed and understood in the light that we can make them. The Dougherty County Public Library, the Northwest Branch, they've made some changes at their local level and are simply now requesting some matching money for a new roof for their existing building rather than trying to build a brand new building. So that reduces that from a $2 million request down to a $390,000 request. But these are important projects. You'll note that the Perry Public Library in Houston County is requesting $1.6 million. This is the project that's been at the top of the list for the last 3 or 4 years, but all of these 12 projects are worthwhile. Their communities have pulled their money together and have their local share ready, so those are available for your consideration. Back to the right-hand side of your packet, the next page down is a project status report. This committee championed maintenance and repair funding this past year, or this current year, in the budget. I believe about $1.3 or $4 million. And these are the projects that are being completed. Some have been completed, some are in progress. But this gives you some idea of the actual cost and the actual work that's going on through those buildings. So that's the one that says FY13. With the chairman's suggestion to us, we've put together an additional list of projects. We've queried the public libraries, and this is the project total that's major repair and renovations for FY14, and this is a request. This would be $1.89 million for this list of projects, or a recommended list. These are communities that have needs, roofs, heating and ventilation, life safety, repair and renovation work. This is a 50-50 matching program, or has been, and that's submitted for your consideration. And at the very last, in line with repair and renovation work, is a much needed request or suggestion for replacement of computers. Computers have become a vital essential foundational service in public libraries. Many of the computers that the public uses for those 13 million uses that they've made are 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, really obsolete. And the suggestion here for your consideration would be a replacement grant under the 5-year MR&R program. $2 million would replace 3,000 computers in all 400 public libraries in every single county in the state. So we leave that for your consideration, but these are important needs for public libraries at this time. And again, I deeply appreciate the opportunity to say a few words, and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Veach. I'm particularly appreciative of the status report. If you'll remember, we talked about this. Look at this list and see those 50-50 matches and see how many libraries and how many communities we touched with this. Sometimes we wish we could do more of the full-fledged library support in these budget times. Maybe we can't again this year, but each of these HVAC, roof, life safety, carpet represent jobs in those communities too, from some local contractor that may not have had an opportunity that might have kept their door open. So I'm fairly proud of this committee's work on this line. So we'll consider the computers and the full capital request from each community, along with this new list of maintenance and renovation. Any questions for Mr. Veach? Certainly.
Lamar, the thing that I hear a lot, and I'm sure the chairman has too, the personnel in the library, there's been an increase in the state health benefit plan. Can you bring us up to date on that and what the concern is? I know it's a cost, but will you feed us in on that?
With a combination of what we understand to be part of state law and part of the rules and regulations for the state benefit health program, the public libraries have fallen into an odd place that requires them to provide full health benefits if an employee works over 17 and a half hours a week. And this has put a terrible financial strain on the libraries by not being able to hire adequate part-time people at a reasonable cost. And in some cases, the cost of the employee is the salary of the employee is less than the health benefit that they're having to pay for. So there's a group of public library directors that are interested in looking at the law and in looking at the regulation to see if there's some relief. For instance, there are many state agencies that only pay benefits if a person works 30 hours or more.
Speaking of relief, Mr. Veach, I'm going to ask a major courtesy. I'm going to need to adjourn the meeting and seek some of that relief.
We'll be happy to discuss with you offline and even in your committee, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Meeting adjourned.